Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. I'm glad you're here. If you have your Bible, let's be turning to Genesis chapter 25. Genesis 25. We're going to study the life of Jacob today. You know, we've been studying Old Testament characters. We've looked at kind of the first class of looking at their life, and then the second class sort of looking at some of the final statements that they had, some of their parting words. And so Jacob is our victim this morning. Before we do that, we'll have an opening prayer, Joel.
Let's pray. Father, we're so blessed to be here this morning. So grateful to be together to study more about your word, and look into things in the scriptures, Father, and worship. Father, I thank you for the group that's here this morning. Thank you for the family here. As we proceed into class and to worship later, Father, I pray that you open our hearts, prepare our minds. I pray that our worship here on is glorifying. Father, I thank you for the moisture, blessing today, and the blessing that is, and the prayer that is, Father. Father, if it be your will, I pray that you. Father, later on we're going to partake in communion, take in your Son, those emblems that represent him, Father. I pray that you're preparing our hearts and minds now. I pray that we are here this morning for the right reason. I pray that what we do this morning is glorifying. Father, I thank you for your word. Thank you for your Son. And we pray.
Amen. Okay, Genesis 25. Studying the life of Jacob. You know, Jacob had a really exciting life. I don't know that I would want to have his life. You remember he was a twin. He was a fraternal twin. You remember he stole the blessing, stole the birthright, and made himself sort of a stench to his brother, and ran away from his brother in fear, and then was later reunited. He wrestled with God. You think about that. I don't think I'd want to wrestle with God, you know. But he had a really exciting life. Genesis 25 talks about the birth of Jacob. So let's begin reading now. Genesis 25 and verse 19 and following. This is the account of Abraham's son Isaac. So Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, from Padan Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, "The two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When the time had come for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first came out, was red, and his whole body like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping at Esau's heel, and so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was a quiet man staying among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So we see right away some problems. There is a little bit of favoritism, isn't there? Jacob and Mama have sort of a connection, and Esau and Dad have a connection. And we know that in a family that's maybe a little bit normal even, that a person that has sort of your same personality, the child has your same personality, it's easy to sort of connect with that child maybe. But we're going to see later that it's more than just a connection, right? There's a lot of favoritism. This is the ultimate dysfunctional family. If you look at the way it acts, it is dysfunctional. And Mom and Dad, have their favorites. Esau is, the word grasping at the heel, is that Esau? Jacob. Grasping at the heel is an idiom. Does anybody have a footnote in their Bible for what that means for Jacob? He cheats, yeah. Yeah, mine says a deceiver. And so what we're going to see in the life of Jacob is a person who starts out a certain way and then ends up a much better person. And in many ways, that's how our life is, isn't it? We start out unfaithful to the Lord, maybe outside of fellowship with Him, not from birth, obviously, but when we become accountable by age, we begin to turn away and sort of have our own will, and we become disobedient to the Lord. And then we, I think, are on a journey to come back to Him. And the Lord, uses different situations and people, I think, ultimately to try to bring us back. And that is what we're going to see in the life of Jacob. It's one reason that I sort of identify with him in a way. I think most of us, may identify with him. He is undergoing a transformation throughout his life, and we'll see it unfold. So let's look first at Genesis. Well, let's continue with verse 29. This is the first problem that we see in Jacob's life. First sign that something's not quite right with Jacob. We're starting in verse 29 now in chapter 25. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, notice he's cooking. He's a man in the tent, right, with mama. He's cooking. He's not out hunting with dad or whatever. Esau came in from the open country, doing what he always did. He was a man, he was a hunter, right? He was doing manly things. So he comes in and he's famished. Verse 30. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I am famished." That is why he was also called Edom. Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." "Look, I'm about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. And then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew, and he ate and drank, and then he got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. Right off the bat, we have a problem, don't we? First of all, think about Jacob. What would a good brother have done? I mean, a good brother, he's cooking stew with mama, right? And in comes manly brother, "I want some stew, I'm hungry." What would a good brother do? Have some stew. Yeah, I mean, it didn't cost him anything. But you can see something in his heart is not right, is it? I want something from you. I used to work with a guy years ago. He was always wanting to bet. He would, what would you bet me that I can flip this into that trash can or whatever? Just always wanting to get something from you. I never took him up on it because he was good. But he wanted something always. And that is the heart we see in Jacob. Something's not right with him. He is not following the Lord as he should. And we're going to watch as life events bring about a different person in Jacob. So he would not give it to him. And so let's talk about this birthright. What is this birthright business? Turn over put your finger there in Genesis, stay there. But let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 21. Deuteronomy chapter 21. I was in a class one time and someone asked, what's the difference in the birthright and the blessing? And the fellow said they're the same. And it's one of those things that it's easy to judge until you make a mistake like that too. But they're not the same. They're two different things. Deuteronomy chapter 21. Let's start in verse 15. This is talking about the right of a firstborn. Deuteronomy 21, verse 15. If a man has two wives, and he loves one but not the other, and both bear him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the wife he does not love, when he wills his property to his sons, he must not give the rights of his firstborn to the son of the wife he loves in preference to his actual firstborn. The son of the wife he does not love. He must acknowledge the son of his unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double share of all he has. That son is the first sign of his father's strength. The right of the firstborn belongs to him. So we see right away some problems with polygamy, don't we? I mean, the idea that you would not be loved in a home, in a family, that's not good. I knew a missionary one time. He said, Americans are fascinated with this polygamy business and multiple wives. He said, we lived in a country where that was the fact. They had multiple wives. And he said, I went by a couple of wives that were just, one of them was just beating the stuffing out of the other because there was such jealousy and anger in that family. It's not a good thing. We can see that. But this idea of the firstborn got a double portion. And so if you consider if you had maybe 5 sons, and the firstborn, you would divide that inheritance when the father was going to die, you would divide it 6 ways instead of 5. And that oldest firstborn would get a double portion. He would get 2 portions of that. And so it seems kind of unfair to us in our mentality as Americans. We don't think that's fair. It should be even. But in that culture, the oldest, had some rights. The oldest was the leader of the family. He had the authority of the father once the father died in that family. And so that was a way to honor the oldest in that way. Did anybody have a thought about what that meant in their culture?
Came also along with a responsibility to take care of your parents. Also, when your brothers and
yes.
sisters were younger, the surviving one. In that case, one passed away. Eldest responsibility is your family providing.
Okay, so that's a good point, Daniel. I didn't think about that. You've got older parents, and they have financial needs, they have health concerns, and you have an additional responsibility to take care of your parents, and that comes at a cost. And so maybe this idea of dividing that double portion had a practical purpose to help with the parents. That's a good thought. I hadn't thought about that. At first reading, I just thought, this is unfair. But really, he had a lot of responsibility. Yes, sir.
As I understand it, the name Jacob means planter, one who overtakes another.
Oh,
That's
okay.
exactly what he did to his brother, but he also was the one who was doing that for, if things were as they were supposed to be doing that for his family, for his father's family.
True.
Which is why Esau is so upset. I mean, he shows his heart wasn't right either because he was so willing to give it up. Like, well, what use to me if I'm dead? Like, he was going to die from not having a meal.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. He's out hunting, so whatever.
For how many days?
But,
could
yeah,
you-
right. Maybe it was like mountain hunting or something.
Right.
Anyway, for him now then to realize that he basically, birthright had to do with giving up your greater inheritance family. But he had given it up.
Yes.
Jacob was taking it over.
Yes. Yeah, it's easy to judge Jacob here because he's, tricks him. But you think about Esau, how in the Bible says he despised his birthright. How many times have we maybe been an Esau and despised our salvation? We give up our fellowship with the Lord, at least temporarily, for some momentary sin. And really, in many ways, that's I think what has happened with Esau. Yes, sir.
Would that be similar then to a Christian who said, well, it's just too tough.
Yeah.
I'm tired of doing this.
Yeah.
And that's the way the birthright was. You had responsibilities as the firstborn.
Yeah.
And then, how many, even in families today, how many children despise being the firstborn?
Yeah.
Because with it comes other responsibilities
Yeah.
that the other kids don't seem to have. And in that system, they didn't have.
Yeah, this was God's way of making it very clear who had the responsibility of taking care of their parents. In my family, when my dad got unwell, got ill, I sort of had to do that. He was here, and the brothers were moved away, and it's not fun. I mean, I am so grateful, and I'm, truthfully, I am grateful for that opportunity to have done that. Because, man, it brought a closeness that I would have probably not had, and my other brothers don't have now, or didn't have. But it was a lot of responsibility. It's very scary. You're making a living for your family, and then you've got to make a living, really, for your own father. And so I guess there's some practical reasons for having the double portion. I would have loved to have had a double portion at the time. But if you think about it, that's how Satan operates, isn't it? With this idea of, my brother comes in and he's hungry, and instead of just saying, have some stew, I'm going to use it and tempt him, and to do something wrong. Satan catches us, really, at our most vulnerable moment and says, you can have this if you'll give up something that you need, your salvation. Jacob is acting like Satan. He is operating like Satan to take advantage of somebody in the moment that they are the weakest, and to tempt them with something that's going to cost them greatly, cost them much, much more than what the true value of what they've lost is. Now, a good brother would have given it to him, but Jacob uses that to sort of to extort something that was never his in the first place. Right? Okay, so the second thing we're going to see is the stealing of the blessing. So the birthright brought with it property and inheritance and responsibilities, and I dare say a lot of honor, with that position. And Jacob stole it by deception, and Esau despised it and gave it away. But also, this idea of the blessing. Let's look at Genesis 27. Now you're going to read, when Jacob gets old, he gives blessings, right? He gives blessings to his sons. And one of them is a curse. The first one, the firstborn, is a curse because of what Reuben had done. And we'll read about that later. But most of the time, if you notice, the blessing is that. It's a blessing. It's a God, the father will put his hand on the son and, sort of make a prediction about things to come in their life. It's usually a good thing, and it has a lot of honor with it. And so this is what happens. It's a highly valued thing, especially in their culture. And later we're going to see that Jacob, when he blesses his sons, he doesn't bless them all. He curses some, and that is not good at all. But Genesis 27, let's begin in chapter 1. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now old, an old man, and I don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your weapons, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food that I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." So this seems like there's like a celebration here, right? It's not just me bringing you into the room and blessing you. We have a meal, and maybe there's a ceremony associated with that. Verse 5, "Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, 'Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, bring me some game and prepare some tasty food so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen carefully to do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats so that I can prepare some tasty food for your father just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies.'" Now we see that favoritism cropping up, don't we? We have Mama sort of looking at this situation and saying, I'd rather have the blessing for the one I like. And so she sets this thing up. Verse 11, "Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, 'But my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I'm a man with smooth skin.'" So right away you know that sort of confirms what we had read earlier. They were not identical twins. They were fraternal, but in verse 12, "But what if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring down a curse." Well, you think? That's what you're doing, right? Verse 13, his mother said to him, "My son, let the curse fall on me." Remember when the Pharisees were putting up Jesus to Pilate? What did they say? "Curse me in our family. Just do what I say and go in then for them." So verse 14, "So he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and put them on his younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with goat skins. And then she handed to her son Jacob the tasty food and bread that she made. He went to, now think about what's going on here. Mom is conspiring with the kid to deceive the father. What a deceptive, what a mess. I mean, why would you do that? Even if you loved that son better than the other one. This is really not God's plan. And you're really setting yourself up against what God would otherwise have the plan to be. You have shown favoritism to a degree that is going to actually cause a lot of strife. You remember what Proverbs chapter 6, verse 1 and following says, 16 and following says? Remember, God identifies, I think, 6 curses. You remember what one of them was? You remember what that one was?
Blind tongue.
And the one that stirs.
Causes fraction among brethren.
Yeah. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 and through 19 identifies 6 things that God hates. And one of them is one that stirs up discord among brothers. And we sort of apply that to the church, to a divisive brother that's, difficult and not showing love to his other brethren. But, I mean, that would apply, I think, certainly to a family. And that is exactly what she's doing here. She is, by these actions, this is going to cause strife among brethren. I mean, would you put your 2 children together and cause them to have jealousy so they would fight? And that's exactly what's going to happen. Okay, let's go back to where we were. Verse 18, he went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done it to you as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God gave me success," he replied. So there's a big lie, right? Verse 21, then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not." Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he blessed him. "Are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "I am." There's another lie, and another big lie to his dad. Then he said, "My son, bring me some of your game to eat, so that I may give you my blessing." Jacob brought it to him, and he ate. And he brought some wine, and he drank. And then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and of the earth's riches, abundance of grain, new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. And then he said to him, "My father, sit up and eat some game that you may give me your blessing." His father Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" "I am your son," he answered, "your firstborn Esau." Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came in, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." Notice, even though this was through deception, this was honored. God did not take it away or reverse it. He allowed it to stand. Verse 34, when Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry. And he said to his father, "Bless me too, my father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau said, "Isn't it he rightly named Jacob? He deceived me. These 2 times he took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." And then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I have made him lord over you, and have made all his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father." And then Esau wept aloud. His father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness. Away from the dew of heaven above, you will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke off from your neck." Verse 41, Esau held a grudge against Jacob. because of the blessing his father had given him, he said to him, "The days of mourning for my father are near, and then I would kill my brother Jacob." When Rebekah was told what her older son said, Esau said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is consoling himself with the thought of killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Notice, this deception didn't bring about any kind of good, did it? In fact, she lost a son to this because he's going to run away and stay for a number of years. Verse 46, then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I am disgusted with living." Okay, let's skip that part. All right, so she is very distraught, and she sends her son away because of this jealousy and strife. God hates what Rebekah did here. God allows Jacob to steal that and get away with it. And what we're going to see, I think, in this story is that God is patient as Jacob begins to change. And I'm glad for that. I'm glad today that God is patient, even when people are doing wrong, even when we would think we need judgment right now. We need justice for what has been done. God is patient, and he works about events in people's lives, I think, to bring about repentance. And we're going to see that in Jacob's life. God sees him not just as a deceptive person, but as someone who can change. And he gives him opportunity, and he gives him time, and he also gives him some events in his life to help him change. And let's look at the first life event that helps him change, to be a better person. Let's look at Genesis chapter 29. Jacob tricked people. Jacob tricked his brother. And so I think God allows him in this state to himself be tricked. And he's going to learn what it feels like, to be tricked, to be deceived, and to be taken advantage of. We're going to see that in the life of Jacob. Let's look now at Genesis 29, starting in verse 1. Then Jacob continued on his journey. He's running away now. He continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. There he saw a well in a field with 3 flocks of sheep lying near it, because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they replied. He said to them, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" So this is who he's looking for. He's going to go stay with Haran because his mother has sent him away. "Yes, we know him," they answered. Verse 6, Jacob asked to them, "Is he well?" "Yes, he is," they said, "and here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep." "Look," he said, "the sun is still high. It is not time for flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture." "We can't," they replied, "until all the flocks are gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep." While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well, and watered his uncle's sheep. When I read that, I see a man trying to show off in front of a girl. Right? "I'll show you. I'll take care of this." Verse 11, Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and son of Rebekah. So she ran and told her father. And as soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all these things. Then Laban said to him, "You are my own flesh and blood." After Jacob stayed with him for a while, for a whole month, Laban said to him, "Just because you're my relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." Well, this is something that Jacob is pretty good at doing, isn't it? He's pretty good at figuring out what he wants in a situation. And so now Laban opens the door. What do you want? You shouldn't work for free just because you're a relative. Verse 16, now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was lovely in form and beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than some other man stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed only a few days to him because of his love for her. And then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to lie with her. So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob. And Jacob lay with her. And Laban gave his servant girl Zilpah to his daughter as her maidservant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me? Now he gets a taste of his own medicine, doesn't he? He has been the deceiver. He has been the person that took advantage of people, and now he got it back. He is learning the lesson, I think, that God wants him to see, and that is that this is wrong. There are consequences. You know, I don't get the impression that Jacob really cared that Esau was so discouraged, that he lost the birthright and the blessing and all. He sort of just, he wanted what he wanted, and that's what he got. But now he gets a taste of that, and he sees what it's like. Verse 26, Laban replied, it is not our custom here to give you younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish the daughter's bridal week, and then we'll give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work. And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. What a mess, really. You think about that. That is so wrong. Why do this? This is not in keeping, I think, with what the Lord would want, and yet Laban gave his servant girl Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maidservant. Jacob lay with Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years. Again, we see that polygamy is not that great a deal, right? I mean, we have favoritism in the family. People grow through their lives feeling second fiddle to someone else. And just because she wasn't as beautiful, Leah's not as highly favored. And anybody have a thought about kind of what's going on here? So things get worse with Laban. And Jacob decides to go back home. And he's learned that his brother Esau is coming with 400 men on the road. And so he stays behind and prays. You know, he's on the road back now to brother. He doesn't expect it's going to go well because he's cheated him out of everything. And so we're going to come to the story where instead of getting out in front, he stays behind and prays to God. And a funny thing happens, this strange story of how the angel of the Lord comes and wrestles with him. And he strives. I think one of the lessons we're going to see in this striving with the angel of the Lord is that, you know, Jacob has gotten what he wanted throughout his life through deception. And now he's going to learn the lesson that a blessing comes after striving for it. And, you know, we know this is miraculous. If the angel of the Lord wanted to strike him dead, he could. So I think there was a restraint that the angel is showing. Let's look at chapter 32, and we'll begin in verse 1. Actually, you know what? Let's look. Let's start in verse 22. Chapter 32, starting in verse 22. That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he'd sent them across the stream, he sent over his possessions, so Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. We're going to see that he is appeasing Esau with those possessions. Verse 25, when the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched, and he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. He still has some of that in him, doesn't he? I'm not going to let go. I'm not going to change until I get something out of this deal. But he has striven for it, unlike before when he was a deceiver. Verse 27, what is your name, Jacob? Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome. Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him, and as he passed Peniel, he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. Sort of a strange custom, kind of keeping, I guess, in their memory, sort of a memorial to this event. Before he got what he wanted through deception, and now he had to strive for it. And I think one of the lessons we learn is that closeness with God requires some humility. And Jacob now has been humbled. He has wrestled all night, and he did not win, but he didn't lose. And we know that's miraculous. The angel withheld, I think, all of his power in order to allow Jacob to just wear himself out. Blessings come, I think, in God's time with humility. And Jacob has learned a little bit of humility here. And he's also learned this reliance on God. When he gets injured because of this hip socket, think about a New Testament character that had need of humility. What did the Lord do to Paul? Do you remember? Thorn in the flesh, yeah. He had been allowed to be at least privy to the third heaven. And man, I mean, if you were an apostle, you could say, "I am an apostle above all apostles," because I saw the third heaven. And God allowed him to have humility by giving him a thorn in the flesh, and did not remove it after praying 3 times. I think we see that in Jacob too, that he has been injured in this deal. I think it brings about some humility and maybe a little more of what he needed. We do see the blessing, though. His name is changed to Israel, and we know, of course, that'll be a great nation before God. Anybody have a thought before we close? Yes, sir, Daniel.
1 Thessalonians 4:6. I think it's perfectly what you're talking about. It says that none of you use fraud or greed in its business with brother.
Yes.
And it's so easy for all of us when we have things, maybe fraud, we resist well, but greed, we live in a world where we always want more.
Mm-hmm.
An example, when we have things that we get rid of, we like to sell it to make money.
Yes.
But we have brothers and sisters sometimes who are in need,
And need it.
forget that. And we prefer sometimes making money. We forget the secret to success and getting happiness in our life is clinging to God.
Yes.
And that's exactly what he needed to do. We needed to learn that it does not come from fraud, greed, but when we cling to God and his law, that's when blessing truly comes.
Well said, brother. Amen. Good. Anything else? Anybody want to say? We don't have any classes that have to let out, so we can run long if we have to. Nate, I'm sure, has a short lesson prepared. Probably 15 or 20 minutes, maybe.
Hey, I was going to say one point that comes out of that is that you see this change happening in Jacob over a period of time. By the time he gets to where you just referenced this to go, there in chapter 30 and on, he seems to be a lot more stable.
Yes.
He is learning. He's learned some things, but it's up in 27 or 28, I can't remember, where he sets up this memorial, and he says, "Lord, if you'll take care of me, give me food and a place to live, and bring me back to my father's house, then I'll serve you basically for the rest of my life." Well, that's not, you don't bargain with God that way, but you see a change happening in him from that. He's making a commitment to be who God wants him to be if he has God's assurances that God will take care of him. And even though you can't bargain with God like that, the point is you're seeing him slowly turning from the man that he was made, I believe, through his mom.
Yeah.
But who he was to something that really is going to be in service to God for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
It's a neat transformation that you see through several chapters.
That's a good thought. Yeah, he slowly becomes a better person. And I think toward when he does make that bargain, it's almost along the lines of, maybe Gideon saying, if the dew is on the fleece, then this is almost like a test that he wants to trust the Lord, and maybe he's trying. Yeah, good. Okay, thank you guys.